Hi there. Welcome to this overview of resilient flooring. So, first question, what is resilient flooring? Well, resilient is it's a very broad name, which is intended to cover a lot of your vinyl floors. So, vinyl planks, vinyl tiles, that sort of thing. Um, the word vinyl tends to have a negative connotation in the market. So, resilient is just a nicer word for it. And frankly, there's some of these products that are not even vinyl. So, we'll get into that. But resilient flooring is a broad category. It's a broad name for basically anything that's not carpet, it's not hardwood, it's not stone, tile, or laminate. So just about everything else falls into this category of resilient. The most common resilient floors that are on the market today are luxury vinyl planks and luxury vinyl tiles, and both of those are available in both the flexible glue down variety and a rigid variety. We'll dig more into that as well. Another very common resilient floor is a sheet vinyl floor. Many years ago in your grandmother's house, she might have had a linoleum floor in the kitchen. Um, when petroleum products started to take over and plastics and vinyls were the hit, linoleum was replaced with vinyl. And so there was a big period of time where just about all the sheet vinyl that was out there on the market was, or the sheet flooring was sheet vinyl. But we will talk a little bit about today's linoleum floors that are now available. We'll talk for just a moment about vinyl composite tile, VCT tile, as well as rubbers. So when we talk about pros and cons of the resilient category, first of all, pros, there is a wide price range. Okay, so you can find resilient floors that are very expensive and some that are very inexpensive. Typically, resilient floors are very durable. They're soft and warm underfoot. They're low maintenance and easy to clean. They're great for bathrooms and kitchens because most of them are either waterproof or have some semblance of waterproofness or water resistance. And they're non-porous, so that it does make them easy to clean. They don't typically stain very easily. Cons, they are a temporary floor. So what I mean by that is when you're thinking about real estate, there's only two types of flooring that actually add value to the home. One of those is tile, and one of those is hardwood. Well, carpet doesn't add value. Resilient doesn't add value. So even if you spent a lot of money on a really expensive luxury vinyl plank, it's still considered a temporary floor and does not add value to the home. It might make the home easier to sell. It certainly might make it, it's maybe more appealing, but it doesn't really add value to the home. Inexpensive vinyls can easily tear. And I'm sure you've heard horror stories, or you certainly will hear horror stories of people that have had sheet vinyl in a kitchen or bathroom, maybe in a laundry room. They moved the dryer, they moved the washing machine, they moved the refrigerator, and it ripped the sheet vinyl. So inexpensive vinyl can very easily tear. And certainly for inexpensive sheet vinyls or improperly installed sheet vinyls, seams can be visible. And when you see a seam in the middle of the kitchen, it just doesn't look good. Visuals, because this is all man-made printed material, sometimes the visuals can be less realistic. Now, there are higher end resilient floors where the visuals look really good, but certainly for the inexpensive ones, the visuals can look, I'll say, poor, certainly not very realistic. So let's start with sheet vinyl, okay? Sheet vinyl comes in big rolls. They're either 6 feet wide or 12 feet wide rolls. I'm sure you've seen this material before in a bathroom or kitchen somewhere. The way these are normally made, there's a top coat which protects your decorative layer. So you've got a top coat and a wear layer, and then there's the pattern layer, and all of them will have some kind of combination of backing materials. Now they might have a cushion layer, they might have a couple of different cushion layers. Higher end ones are going to have a stronger backing than the cheaper ones. But nevertheless, it comes on a big roll. So in order to install this, it really does have to be rolled out. The floor has to be flat. Now, this is really important when you're looking at doing sheet vinyl floors. The floor has to be flat. If there is any imperfection in the subfloor whatsoever, it will telegraph through. So if you installed this, let's say that you were installing this on a concrete floor, and that concrete floor had a little dip in it somewhere, you're going to see the dip in the sheet vinyl. You're going to see it when it's installed. Let's say you put it over a piece of plywood and that plywood has cracks in it or it has knots in it. you are absolutely going to see the cracks and knots in it. So normally what you have to do is put down an underlayment before we get started, and I'll show you a picture of that momentarily. Normally, sheet vinyl is glued. There are some sheet vinyls, not all of them. You have to be careful and you have to pay attention to the manufacturer's recommendations, but normally they're going to be glued. Some, very limited numbers, can actually be perimeter glued, where you're just gluing around the edge. Some can be taped down, so it's like a perimeter tape. Some can be loose laid, but again, you're going to need to check the manufacturer's recommendations for that specific vinyl. Some are designed to be done that way and some are not. In terms of wood, in terms of looks, yes, there are sheet vinyls that look like wood. There are sheet vinyls that look like stone or tile, mosaics, patterns. And just because it says sheet vinyl, don't shy away from it. There are some sheet vinyl products out there that look really, really good. So I wouldn't necessarily hesitate to use a sheet vinyl floor, but just understand that if you want it to look better, you're probably going to have to pay a little bit more for it. So where did luxury vinyl planks come from? Well, originally, and I'm going to embellish the story a little bit, but originally you had sheet vinyl. This was the and linoleum before it, but sheet vinyl was essentially the first waterproof floor. But it's hard to install. You've got to deal with these big, heavy rolls. And at some point, somebody decided, well, if we just take this and cut it like into strips, it'd be a whole lot easier to install, especially if the customer kind of knew that it's not a matter of seaming it, you're just going to glue it down into place. And so that's essentially what happened is, the idea of sheet vinyl became, well, let's just make this into planks. Now, you've got a couple of different types of planks. You've got a luxury vinyl tile, which looks like tile, and a luxury vinyl plank, which looks like a wood plank. Now, this industry is rife with vocabulary that doesn't make any sense. You will hear people, you will see companies advertise luxury vinyl tile, and you look and it all looks like wood, or luxury vinyl plank and it all looks like stone or tile. This is not like an industry standard. This is it's a convention. Luxury vinyl tile, or LVT, looks like tile, and luxury vinyl plank looks like wood planks. But again, you're going to see it advertised 100 different ways. You're going to see it. You're going to hear customers talk about it in a lot of different ways. Either way, luxury vinyl tile, luxury vinyl plank, they are individual pieces, and they are either glued or floated depending on the construction. Sheet vinyl, again, it's a rolled good, 6 foot or 12 foot wide, and it's normally glued in place. All right, now back to luxury vinyl planks. You will find in big categories, you will find either a glue down version or a floated rigid version. All right, so you see this plank here, right? It's very flexible. You might even call it floppy. In this case, the floor has to be 100% flat because it's going to telegraph, like we talked about, it's going to telegraph those imperfections through. There's nothing wrong with this floor. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a flexible, floppy, glue down version. It's just that you have to make sure that the floor underneath it is flat. Then there's the floated kind, and this is the most common kind. As a matter of fact, in the mobile showroom, I believe that like 98% of the luxury vinyl planks that you have in the mobile showroom are this rigid kind. And the reason they're so popular is because you can cover minor subfloor imperfections. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to be able to bridge a 2-foot gap, but you will, if you have like a little, a half-inch knot or something in a piece of plywood, you can easily just go right over it with this and have no trouble whatsoever. And most of these have attached underlayments, so you don't even have to worry about an underlayment per se. Rigid luxury vinyl planks, there's 2 main types, and then I'm going to share with you a third one. The 2 main ones that you're going to see in the market is WPC and SPC. Now, what does WPC stand for? Well, when this was originally designed, there was a company that's no longer in business called US Floors. US Floors created Cortec. Cortec was eventually bought out by Shaw, so the product is still out there just under the Shaw name instead of the US Floors name. When US Floors developed Cortec, they developed this core, this rigid core that's on the inside of the luxury vinyl plank, the rigid luxury vinyl planks, and they used wood fibers in it, and it was a wood polymer core. So it was a mixture of, let's just call it sawdust. It was a mixture of wood fibers and a PVC polymer base, and so it created a very, very rigid core. Well, There are people out there today that will still call this a wood polymer core because that's what it started with, but there's no manufacturers today that use wood in it anymore. So what does the W mean? Well, it's got to stand for something. So now you'll hear people call it a waterproof polymer core, which is a little confusing because if I come over here to the SPC, which is a stone polymer core, that's also waterproof. So to say that this is waterproof polymer core and this is stone polymer core, it makes it sound like this one's not waterproof, but the reality is that they're both waterproof. Okay. What's the difference? Fine. So when you look at a WPC core, when you take and you look at the edge of that board, I know it doesn't show up very well in this picture, but when you look at one of your sample boards, to me, it looks like the old school yellow birthday cake. All right. You look at it and it's got little air bubbles in it. It's not cushy, but it's less dense than an SPC. When you look at the edge of an SPC board, it looks like gray concrete. There's a lot of dense material in this, and there's no air bubbles in it whatsoever. So it makes the SPC a lot more dense. So everything except the core is the same between a WPC and an SPC. There's typically a wear layer. You might even have a coating on top of the wear layer. Then there's an image layer. Then you've got your core, either the WPC core, which looks like a yellow birthday cake and it's less dense, or an SPC core, which is much more dense, and then some type of underlayment. CoreTech comes with a cork underlayment. That was a US Floors thing. Everything had cork. Or you may find some sort of synthetic rubber as an underlayment. They both perform equally well, so there's not really an issue there. But normally what you'll see is that your WPC and SPC are exactly the same with the exception of the core. So what difference does that core make? Well, most of the time, WPC is going to be less expensive than real wood, but it's normally more expensive than SPC. And when I say this, when we talk about cost, you have to think in terms of ranges, right? Let's say on average, WPC is more expensive than SPC, but you can absolutely find some higher end SPCs that are more expensive than lower end WPCs. You have to think in terms of ranges. Feel, the WPC is less dense, right? So what would that lead me to conclude? Well, WPC core retains a little bit of warmth. It doesn't mean that your floor is going to feel warm when you step out of bed in the morning, but what it does mean is it's going to be less cold than an SPC floor would be by a few degrees. I'm never going to oversell this. I'm not going to tell the customer it's going to reduce their energy bills or anything goofy like that. But I would say that the feel of a WPC core, a WPC board, it does feel different than an SPC. SPC does get colder. There's no give underfoot whatsoever. So if I were, let's say that I were in a customer's home and that customer told me that one of the things they love to do is they absolutely love to cook. So they spend a ton of time in the kitchen on their feet. Well, I'm probably going to focus on WPC boards because it's going to help them feel better at the end of the day. On the other hand, if I go into a customer's home and I see a pool table, I see really, really heavy furniture, maybe even in the kitchen, the refrigerator is one of these massive, almost commercial sized refrigerators. Those things are really, really heavy and they can cause the WPC boards to dent. So in a case like that, where there's some really super heavy furniture, I might stick with an SPC core. All right, so the WPC might feel better, but the SPC, because of the density of it, has no give, and so you're not going to be able to dent it with heavy furniture. Both of them could be used in basements, bathrooms, kitchens. That's fine. Durability. The only reason I'm going to give the WPC a 4 out of 5 instead of a 5 out of 5 is just because it's possible to dent it with heavy furniture. But in terms of how well it holds up to daily life, it's the same because that doesn't have anything to do with the core. That has everything to do with the wear layer that's on top of it. So you can have a WPC with a really, really good wear layer and an SPC with a really, really good wear layer, and both of them are going to perform the same in terms of how it functions over time. Like I said, the only reason I give the WPC a 4 out of 5 is just because it's possible to dent it. Moisture resistant, both of them are 100% waterproof from above and below. Now that doesn't mean that the whole floor is waterproof. So If you were to take an individual plank and put it in a bathtub and leave it overnight, there's nothing's going to happen to it, right? It's 100% waterproof. But some of the luxury vinyl planks that are out there actually have a waterproof seam, some don't. So when those two boards go together, the question is whether or not water can get in between them. All right, what difference does that make? Normally, if somebody spills something and you clean it up, it's no big deal. Somebody spills something, you know what? Even if it stays for several hours and it gets cleaned up, it's no big deal. But if you had somebody that had the habit of overwatering plants, and now there's water that's underneath the planter for a long period of time, in some cases, it is possible for that water to go in between the boards and now have an impact on the subfloor. All right, so when we talk about this floor is waterproof, it is the board itself that's waterproof. You're not necessarily making a waterproof covering for the subfloor. So just be careful, again, that you don't oversell this. Installation, both of these are very easy installation, some sort of interlocking system. And I'm going to show you a picture of that in a moment. Now, I said that there's two primary ones, right? So there's a WPC and an SPC, but there's now a new one that's out on the market called a mineral core. And this mineral core is extremely dense. Typically, these mineral core boards are much, much thicker than a WPC or an SPC board. So they tend to be thicker. They're extremely dense. So you're not going to have trouble with heavy furniture on them. And a lot of these mineral core boards have been designed in a way that even pets can't scratch them. They're very scratch resistant. There's no PVC in this product whatsoever. So look for those mineral core boards in your sample boards, and notice the difference between let's call it the yellow birthday cake versus the gray concrete versus a really, really thick mineral core. And you'll be able to look at the edge of the board and be able to tell the difference. Now, one note about all of these products, whether it's sheet vinyl, whether it's luxury vinyl plank, rigid versus flexible, no matter what, all of these are man-made products, okay? And they're produced in run numbers or what are called die lots. So to prevent some inconsistency in product appearance, you really need to make sure that when you order material that you're getting it all from the same die lot. Normally this isn't a problem, but you will have customers that, you know, maybe they went to Big Lots or Costco, or they went to Ollie's Bin or some other liquidators, right? That they bought the material from. If they are different die lot numbers, the floor is going to look different when it goes down. And you know, if you do have a case where you're stuck with different die lots, at least mix those boards from multiple cartons so that it doesn't look like, you know, half the room was done in one die lot and half the room was done in the other die lot. The customer will be able to tell the difference, and it's not going to look good. So just be cognizant of it. It's not something, most of the time, if you're ordering from a Shaw, from a Mohawk, when you're ordering from the manufacturer, you're not going to run into this problem because they're going to ship you all from one die lot. It's normally when you have a customer that has gone to one of these other liquidating companies, whether it's an Ollie's, a Big Lots, a Lumber Liquidators, that get rid of a bunch of material at one time. That's where you run into problems with die lots not matching, and then the floor doesn't look good. All right, so we talked for a moment. We talked a little bit before about sheet vinyl, right? Well, the predecessor to sheet vinyl was linoleum. So again, if you go back to your grandmother's house and you think back, she probably had a linoleum floor in the kitchen, right? It was the original sheet floor. When the petroleum industry came on board and started making flooring, you have vinyls that were made into sheet vinyl, and it was much cheaper than linoleum. And actually, it held up better because the linoleum would eventually yellow and fade over time. Today, let's fast forward. There's a company called Forbo, and Forbo makes a product, their brand name, called Marmoleum, which is essentially like a linoleum. Now, linoleum was made with linseed oil. It was a natural product. Marmoleum is made from natural products and recycled materials. It is made with flaxseed oil, wood flour, pine resins, jute, limestone, pigments. It is 100% natural, right? So the Forbo systems, they're primarily a commercial company. They do make some residential products, and you're going to have samples for some residential products. When you go to the Forbo website, you'll see a ton of commercial material that's out there. But they make linoleum under their name Marmoleum. They make vinyl They make luxury vinyl. They make flocked carpet flooring. Okay. It's Marmoleum is Forbo's brand of linoleum. It's not the same as vinyl flooring. So it is typically referred to as linoleum or lino floor coverings. They're made out of 100% raw materials, right? Natural raw materials. So there's no synthetic materials like PVC, plastic, or polyolefin. So I'm just going to leave this here with you. We're not going to do a deep dive into Marmoleum. If you go to the Forbo website, if you go to forbo.com, and you can start doing a deep dive into Marmoleum and see what's there. What I would tell you is that if you're pitching to a customer that's very concerned about sustainability, they're very concerned about environmental concerns, and that they want a product in their home that is going to be really, really sustainable, very natural, Marmoleum is certainly a way to go. It is much more expensive than a lot of your luxury vinyl planks. It is certainly a lot more expensive than sheet vinyl. But if somebody is willing to pay for it, there's some absolute beautiful products that they've got. They've got some rich, vibrant colors in their product line. I mean, I highly recommend it for the right customer. Now we go to the other end of the spectrum with vinyl composite tiles, VCT tiles. These are horribly inexpensive to install, but very expensive to maintain. You normally see these in grocery stores. You might see them in hardware stores. This is typically a commercial product. It is very inexpensive to install. These VCT tiles are incredibly cheap, and putting them down normally means that you put some glue down and off you go. As a matter of fact, if you walked into this store, looks like a grocery store. If you were to walk into this grocery store and they wanted a new VCT floor, you could literally strip the wax off of this old one and put a new floor right on top of this one. So it would be very inexpensive to install it. However, you probably have noticed that grocery stores at 2 o'clock in the morning are out there waxing their floors, and they've got the big buffer out there doing it. It's very expensive to maintain these. So normally, I mean, you're actually seeing more and more grocery stores moving away from VCT and moving towards something else. In some cases, I've seen where they just do, the bare concrete, seal the concrete, and don't even bother with flooring. But VCT, it's a good product. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a good product for the right application. But again, normally this is in commercial spaces. One other resilient product that we'll talk about is rubber flooring. So you're probably not going to be competitive if if the next Planet Fitness opens up in your area and they want you to cover it with rubber. That's probably not where you're going to be able to compete. However, you do have rubber flooring in your warehouse samples and in your studio sample collection, essentially so that you can handle a home gym, right? You go into someone's house, they want a hardwood floor in the living room, they want carpet in the bedrooms, and they want to take one bedroom and convert it into a home gym. That's where you're going to be able to play, okay? Rubber flooring is available in mats, it's available in rolls, and it's available in these interlocking tiles. Now, these interlocking tiles are kind of neat because you snap them together. There's no glue or anything. Mats and interlocking tiles are typically floated. The rubber stuff, the rolled rubber typically has to be glued down. But the interlocking tiles, you can simply, lock them together like little puzzle pieces, and you're done. Oftentimes, you might have a customer that's just looking for a mat. So maybe they don't want to rip out the carpet in a particular room, or they don't want to rip out the LVP, for example, that they've already got in a room, but they want something to protect it. Well, you can get rubber mats to do that, and they can put their exercise equipment on top of the mats, and you don't have to glue the mats down. You can simply flop them into place. You don't necessarily have to glue the rubber down, the rolled rubber down. It's just more common to do so. Now, they do come in a variety of colors, so it doesn't always have to be just black. It is going to be black, but you'll see that your rubber manufacturers will put speckles of color in it, just to mix it up a little bit. So typically, rubber is going to be predominantly black with whatever the colored specks are, and it'll come in a variety of different thicknesses. Now, I've just got 3 here, but you'll find manufacturers that do 5 millimeter, which is going to be a little thinner than 1/4 inch, 8 millimeter, which is going to run right in here in between. So you're going to get a number of different sizes. I just happen to pick 3 for the visual here. One caution about quoting a rubber floor proposal, writing a rubber floor proposal: freight is very expensive. This stuff is extremely heavy. And so oftentimes, even though you might have a national account with someone that's, maybe on the West Coast, if you're on the East Coast, that freight might make it so that it's more affordable for you to find somebody local that has rubber flooring that you can buy locally, or that you don't have to ship as far. The freight might be more expensive than the product itself. So just bear that in mind. If you're ever going to quote a rubber floor, I would highly recommend that you actually get a freight quote from the manufacturer that you're buying from, so that you can include the actual freight cost in your proposal. All right, so let's shift gears and talk a little bit about installation. So for most of these products just have to acclimate to room temperature. You're not worried about keeping a product in the house for 10 days for the humidity to come into play, because most of these products don't absorb humidity. So it just needs to be the same temperature as what's in the house. Most of the time, that means a same day installation, right? The only time that you might leave it overnight or something would be if your product is stored in an unheated warehouse in the middle of Minneapolis. You're in Minnesota and it's 32 below zero. It might be that you want to bring that in out of the cold and let it sit and warm up a little bit before it gets installed. But most of the time, a same day install is going to be the key. If you are gluing something down, that substrate must be, or your subfloor has to be flat, right? It needs to be smooth, flat, clean, and dry. Concrete needs to be prepped. So that means if there's a dip in the concrete, you're putting in a little bit of self-leveling compound just to fill the gap. If there's a hump in the concrete, your installer may be grinding that hump down, especially if there's like a spike in the concrete. If you are gluing down, you are going to be using a 1/4 inch or 5 millimeter sanded plywood. Some people call it Luan, some people call it just underlayment. This photo here is of an installer that's stapling down that 1/4 inch underlayment. Now, the SurePly is just a brand name. This shows up in a lot of different brands, but it's basically like a sheet of plywood that's very, very smooth. And this allows you to be able to install a glue down product directly on this material so that it looks very smooth and you don't have anything telegraphing through. You can install a glue down product on top of a single layer of vinyl. So let's say you're in a kitchen and they already have a sheet vinyl, but where the sheet vinyl has little indentations, maybe they've got simulated grout lines, those are going to need to be filled with an embossing compound or an embossing leveler. If you're installing a rigid product, some substrate variance is okay. So let's go back to the same kitchen where you've got a sheet vinyl that has simulated grout lines. If I'm doing a rigid luxury vinyl plank, I don't need to fill those lines. Most of the time, if there's a tile in the kitchen and they want to do an LVP on top of the tile, as long as those grout lines are fairly close together, it's a small grout line, I don't even have to fill that. Now, if I'm going to glue down, then yes, all that stuff has to be filled so that it doesn't telegraph through. But a rigid can float right over top of that. Your installer is going to want to create some intentional randomness with links, so end joints don't need to line up with one another. And for visual sake, typically your wood look plank should follow the longest wall. Installation options. So how does this stuff get installed? Well, sheet vinyl, normally it's a full spread glue down. There are some sheet vinyls out there that can be loose laid, perimeter bonded, or taped down, but you will need to make sure with the manufacturer that that's the case for this specific product. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, look, all of Shaw's sheet vinyl can be glued, it has to be glued down. No, Shaw makes some that has to be glued down, and some that can be loose laid, and some that can be perimeter bonded. So it is on a material by material basis. So just check the manufacturer's installation recommendations before you determine how you want to install it. For luxury vinyl, there's full spread glue down, as is the case with your flexible floppy luxury vinyl planks. There are some that have a pre-applied adhesive, okay, and there are some floated ones that are out there. And then, of course, your rigid luxury vinyl planks are typically floated. Installation options are always product specific, so just check those. Now, when we talk about floating, particularly like a rigid luxury vinyl plank, Most of them are going to have some kind of locking system. All right, so some of the flexible floppy luxury vinyl planks do have a locking system, but it's rare. Most of those are just going to be glued down. The rigid ones, enhanced rigid luxury vinyl planks, almost all of these are going to have some type of locking system. Now, this locking system is going to go by different names. So as manufacturers develop their own version of the locking system, they gave it a fancy little name like a click lock or angle tap or drop lock or fold and tap. You're going to see this, this nomenclature is going to be different on many of your sample boards. It's going to be different as you look in the market. But just understand that whether it's click lock, angle tap, drop lock, fold and tap, there's a bunch of them out there. Basically, what it means is that one board fits inside the other one like this, and they click together, or they lock together in such a way that they don't pull back apart. So most of your rigid luxury vinyl planks have some type of locking mechanism. Now, as you're trying to sell the product to the customer, this doesn't really matter. This is more for your information so that you understand how these things go together. The pre-applied adhesive, most people will call this a peel and stick, right? And it shows up on some luxury vinyl planks where you basically have, this, you've got adhesive that's already on, a pressure sensitive adhesive that's already on the plank, and you got to pull the backing off before you can stick it down. This is normally low end do-it-yourself type boards. There's not any of these. There might be one that's in the mobile showroom. But most of the time, this peel and stick vinyl plank typically is a low-end do-it-yourselfer. Now, higher end are grouted vinyl tiles. There are vinyl tiles that look like tile that actually get grouted. These are, when an installer puts them down, they use spacers just like tile. As a matter of fact, it might be your tile installer that does this because they're accustomed to working with spacers. The grout is different than a typical tile grout. Typical tile grout is a sanded, cement-based grout. These are acrylic grouts, and they're specifically designed to go with the luxury vinyl tiles. So you would get the grout from the same manufacturer that makes the tiles. But these are, this is basically a glue down installation. So what does that mean? It means that the substrate has to be flat, right? The substrate's got to be flat. In some of these cases, the tiles don't have to be grouted. You could install them just butted up one right next to the other. But in the case where they get grouted, again, get the grout from the manufacturer. How do you maintain these? Well, most of these are very, very simple to maintain. Dust mop, sweep it, vacuum it regularly. If you're vacuuming it or your customer is vacuuming it, I would recommend that they turn off the beater bar, the little rotating brush, so that you're only using the suction so that it's not causing additional wear to the top of the boards. You could easily damp mop this from time to time with plain water or spot clean it with a vinyl cleaner. Most of the time, I see customers go for these Swiffers. They're very simple, makes it very easy to clean this. So sort of summarizing what we've done here, resilient flooring, they're very durable, okay, but the durability will vary greatly depending on the product and even the cost of the product. So sheet vinyl, for example, there's really, really cheap sheet vinyls. They're going to rip easily. And there's very expensive sheet vinyls that are very, very tough. So just understand that the durability is going to vary greatly depending on the product. Most of them do resist scratching and staining, but again, that's going to vary. Most of them are waterproof. I know I've got here that some are waterproof. The reality is that most of them are waterproof, but be careful. That doesn't mean that you're making a water barrier for your subfloor. It just means that the product itself is waterproof. There are some that actually do have a waterproof seam. And in those cases, yes, you really are creating something special for the customer. Some can be grouted. Almost all of them are very easy to maintain. They're relatively inexpensive. And when I say relatively inexpensive, typically they're less expensive than what they're trying to mimic. So a luxury vinyl plank that's trying to mimic hardwood is going to more than likely be cheaper than the hardwood that it's trying to mimic. A luxury vinyl tile that's trying to mimic natural stone, for example, is more than likely going to be cheaper than the natural stone. And there's a ton of designs that are out there. Are there limitations? Absolutely. Okay. The market has made it sound like luxury vinyl planks and resilient products are bulletproof. They are not. Floor prep can be expensive, especially if you've got to put down that 1/4 inch plywood. That 1/4 inch plywood is expensive, and it's expensive to install. So that floor prep can be expensive if you're trying to glue something down. But improper prep, if you don't do it, that's where most of the installation issues come from. Seams can be visible on sheet vinyl if they're not done well. Inexpensive vinyl looks fake and seams start to curl. Like you might have a product where the top layer peels off or where it starts to buckle in the middle if it's not installed properly, or if you put a really, really inexpensive product in somebody's home. This is truly one of those categories where you sort of get what you pay for. If you spend a little more money on it up front, you're going to get something that's going to last a lot longer. Now, we've talked about this, but I'm really going to highlight this hard. If you're installing a flexible glue down resilient, the substrate must be flat, okay? And normally what that means is that you're getting one of these sheets. I mean, you're getting these 1/4 inch or 5mm underlayment sheets. Again, SurePly is just a brand name. It doesn't have to be this. But you're getting one of these, or you're getting this 1/4 inch sanded plywood underlayment or 5mm sanded plywood underlayment, and this is being installed. That is absolutely necessary if you're installing a glue down version, right? Okay, not on concrete. Concrete is just concrete. But if you're putting this over a wood subfloor, notice OSB is not 100% flat. Plywood is not 100% flat. So if you've got an OSB subfloor, if you've got a plywood subfloor, you're going to have to put this 1/4 inch underlayment on top of this before you can install a flexible glue down resilient. But if you are installing a rigid resilient, or for example, let's just say a rigid LVP, this 1/4 inch plywood is normally not needed. So if I were to take a rigid LVP board, I could put it on top of this plywood, no problem at all. I could put a rigid board on top of this OSB, no problem at all. I don't need the 1/4 inch underlayment. There is a common mistake that people make. The tablet is going to default 1/4 inch plywood. When you select in the tablet that you're doing a luxury vinyl plank floor, the tablet is going to default that you need 1/4 inch plywood. And the reason it does it, it's on purpose, is to keep you safe. All right. So it adds that in there. It's up to you to take it back out. So the tablet doesn't know if you're installing flexible or if you're installing rigid. It puts it in there to keep you safe. However, this can add as much as 25% unnecessary cost to your estimate. So before you know it, you've completely priced yourself out of a job. Okay. What is typical when you're doing a proposal? Well, normally you're going to have to move furniture, you're going to have to move appliances, you're going to have to remove the existing flooring and throw it away. If it's flexible, in other words, you're going to install a glue down flexible vinyl, then yeah, your 1/4 inch plywood or some sort of prep is going to be needed. This is a really basic installation. You're probably just putting up quarter round around the baseboards instead of replacing baseboards. You may need transition pieces and freight. Additional labor might be needed if you have to do your floor leveling, or if you're going for one of the really, really thick mineral core boards, you might have some door trimming to do. Again, I'll say this again. The tablet adds 1/4 inch plywood underlayment by default. It does that to keep you safe, but you need to remove it when it's not needed. Otherwise, you're going to price yourself out of a lot of jobs. Okay, I put together this this little outline as sort of our final slide here. Well, one more after this. This is sort of an overview of how you would categorize these things. So resilient, I would put into 3 different buckets. I would say you've got sheet resilient, you've got luxury vinyl, and you've got other. All right, well, sheet can be vinyl or it could be linoleum. Both of those are going to come in 6 or 12-foot rolls. They're both going to be glued down. It's got to be flat substrates for both of these, right? And for linoleum, really you're looking at one main choice, and that is to go to Forbo and look at their Marmoleum. This is your sheet version of resilient flooring. Now, luxury vinyl planks or luxury vinyl tiles. Remember, plank looks like wood and tile looks like stone or tile. There's the flexible version, which is glue down version. And there's the rigid version, or you'll hear some people call it enhanced. The flexible version comes in planks or tiles. It has to be glued down, and the subfloor has to be flat, or the substrate has to be flat. Again, if you're on concrete, that's great. You can glue directly to the concrete, but if there's dips or humps, fill in the dips and grind down the humps. If you're in a home with a crawl space, or you're on the second floor and the subfloor is OSB or plywood, you're probably putting down 1/4 inch underlayment to make sure that that subfloor is 100% flat before you glue anything down. Yes, that adds cost. Okay, well then rigid is maybe the way to go, because with rigid you don't have to do all that. Rigid comes in SPC, WPC, or mineral core. It's typically floated with some kind of click lock interlocking system. The substrate needs to be flat. Some variation, some minor variation is okay, but if you've got big humps or you've got big holes in it, it's not going to do that. So minor variations are okay. Then other, we talked about two different ones. We talked about VCT and rubber. VCT is typically commercial. It's glued down on a flat substrate, but maintenance, it's got to be sealed, it's got to be waxed. Maintenance is a big deal with this. You normally don't see VCT in people's homes. I've seen it, but not very often. Rubber, again, where your niche is going to be is in home gyms, where people are taking one bedroom and turning it into a gym, right? Maybe you're doing other work in the home. It comes in mats, it comes in rolls, it comes in the interlocking tiles. It can be glued down, or in some cases just floated, but be careful when you're quoting these, because freight is very, very expensive. So where do you go to get more information? Because there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of pages worth of information that's written on Resilient, particularly on luxury vinyls. You can go to shawfloors.com or cortecfloors.com. Both of those are owned by Shaw. And both of those are going to have some great information on how to install it and what the product is. Cali Floors, it's the same company that was Cali Bamboo. Now they've changed their name to Cali Floors, and they do a ton of luxury vinyl planks. And matter of fact, we've got some really good ones in the mobile showroom. Mohawk Flooring is another great source for luxury vinyls. Happy Feet International, Forbo, specifically for Marmoleum. Now, in our collection, the Floor Coverings International collection, we have US Rubber as a rubber supplier. But there's another website out there that I really like. It's called rubberflooring4u.com. And I really like that as a great place. I mean, you can buy from them if you set up an account. But I really like that website as a great knowledge base for what to do for different rubber. US Rubber's website is good, but I think the website for rubber flooring is better. So you could go to the Rubber Flooring for You website to learn, and then buy from US Rubber or whatever you need to do. Obviously, there's a ton of information on YouTube and Google. There's just a lot of information that's out there today on luxury vinyls. I mean, on Resilient products, specifically luxury vinyl planks. So become educated so that you can educate your customer on these. There's a lot more information than what we covered here. Get with your vendor reps as well and have them walk you through what is specific about their product that makes it stand out from everybody else's. Thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to working with you in the future.